Hey everybody, so if you fish quite a bit, you notice that in the last few years, the conversation has been revolving around, well, what's going on with the Pacific salmon populations because the populations are declining and we don't really know what's going on. And that conversation usually leads to, well, these guys are catching too many fish, and what about the log industry? What about salmon farming? They're killing off all the juvenile salmon. But the reality is that the cause of the declines, it's a collection of problems, both man-made and natural. And we tend to play that blame game, and which leads to nowhere really. A few years ago, I sat through a really good presentation on environmental changes, well, particularly climate changes, how did they impact salmon populations. And I want to show it to you guys. This is a presentation that was done at a DFO conference. So there are two things I really want to achieve by showing you this presentation. So one would be to watch this and look at the problem more objectively rather than emotionally. Quite often we watch all these documentaries that has a story to tell, but it tends to tell only one side of the story. And we watch it, we get triggered, we get angry, but we don't really look for a solution in the end. This particular presentation is very scientific based, but the language being used by the presenter, Sue Grant, it's very simplistic, so everyone without a scientific background can really understand it. And just to get a sense of how significant this problem on environmental change is, and what we can actually do about it. The second thing I want to show everyone is how much collaborative work is being done behind the scene when it comes to salmon population sustainability. There's so much work being done everywhere, from freshwater to saltwater. There's so much data collection going on. Salmon management is not an easy task because the range of the species is huge. We're going from anywhere from Prince George all the way to the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So there's so many variables, and to make predictions on exactly how many fish are coming back every year, it's a really, really difficult task. And we're getting better at it every year. The more information we're getting, the better we are when it comes to managing these fish. So hope you guys will watch it. The presentation is about 25 minutes long, and I hope everyone will share it, digest the information, and think about what we can do individually to save these salmon populations. So enjoy, and there'll be more fishing videos to come very, very soon, I promise. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. What we're gonna present on in this presentation are environmental conditions to inform salmon returns in 2021. And this is an important presentation because when we think about what is coming back in the upcoming return year, qualitatively and quantitatively, in some cases, we're trying to use the past relationships we have with salmon escapements, returns, and sometimes environmental variables to make predictions about what we expect to see returning in the upcoming year. And the challenging situation we find ourselves in is that we're increasingly facing unprecedented environmental conditions in the environments that salmon are using. And that's important context because it introduces more uncertainty than there might have been in the past in regards to what we expect to see returning. So this is really a presentation that's setting the stage for the big changes that we're seeing. It's a high-level overview presentation. There's also spin-off projects that go into more details on a stock-by-stock basis, but in this presentation, we're providing a high-level overview. This work today was led by Bronwyn McDonald, Don Lewis, and Nikki Wilson. And in the State of the Salmon program, the team basically pulls together the science that comes from a lot of different places, internally, externally, different organizations, First Nations, and tries to integrate that information. And that's what our State of the Salmon program is all about, integrating what we know to create a common narrative that combines information. So that's what we're doing today, is presenting work that comes from a lot of different people collectively working together to tell this story about what we're seeing in the environment and what we're seeing with our salmon. Our salmon spend the first part of their lives in freshwater, and the adults move into either watersheds in the Yukon Territory or in British Columbia. Their eggs incubate in gravel, and then for some of these, they move into the ocean shortly after they emerge from the gravel, and others spend 1 to 2 years in rearing in freshwater. But all our salmon spend the latter part of their lives in the marine ecosystem. And depending on the population, they can use quite a broad area in this Northeast Pacific as rearing areas. So before I go into the details, what we're seeing regionally and locally for salmon in freshwater and the marine ecosystems, I want to take a step back. And we're going to talk about global climate change and temperature changes that we're seeing on the planet, because what we're seeing regionally and locally is embedded within this global context. Oops. The planet is warming, and this is a figure of land and ocean temperature anomalies. When I use the word anomalies, this means deviations from average, and it's commonly used when presenting environmental information. So when in this figure, and in a lot of the figures, when you see colors that are blue or falling below zero in this case, this means that they're cooler than average temperatures. If they're falling above zero and they're colored red, they're considered warmer than average temperatures. This figure shows a time series of global temperatures from 1880 all the way to present day in 2020. And temperatures have clearly been warming on the planet. We've gone from a cool phase or cool period in the beginning of this time series, started to transition in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and then moved into a warmer than average period all the way up till now. And in the last 5 years, we're hitting record warm temperatures. So in 2016, that was the hottest year on record. 2020, the year we're in right now, is number 2. But once all the data's in and processed, it's likely that this will get bumped up to first place. A lot of other recent years are in the top 5. And in recent years, it seems like every new year that we're in gets added into the top 5. So this is a trajectory that will continue under climate change. We'll continue to see warmer and warmer conditions going forward. So what we're seeing on that global scale will play out in regards to what we're seeing regionally and locally for our salmon populations. And this isn't surprising. We are embedded within this global context, but further to that, our Canadian salmon and us reside in northern latitudes on the planet. And northern latitudes are warming at greater than double the rate of global warming. So it shouldn't be surprising that if we see big changes on a global scale, that those are playing out in our local systems. Before I go into the freshwater marine ecosystems and look at what we're seeing leading up to the 2020 returns, we wanted to just ground us on the key years that we're looking at for the 2021 returns. So if we look at sockeye, just 5 sub 2, these are 5-year-olds that spend 2 winters in freshwater, 3 winters in the marine ecosystem. If they're coming back in 2021, we go back 5 years to 2016, and that was the year that the parents spawned. The eggs were incubating in gravel. The juveniles moved into their lakes in 2017, reared there for a year, and then migrated downstream into the ocean as smolts in 2018, and then reared in the ocean for 2018, 2019, and 2020. Chinook 5 sub 2s, very similar in terms of time and space broadly where they are. If you go to 4-year-olds, you're just bumping up the going back 4 years instead of 5, so the brood year escapements are different, and there's a slight shifting in terms of when they were in their freshwater rearing grounds. Same with 3-year-olds, you're just bumping things up, so there's a little bit of shift in terms of where the animals are broadly in time and space. And of course, for pinks, they're 2-year-olds generally, so you're going back 2 years. So when we put this all together, and these are just the big categories for age classes, the key years that we're going to focus on in this presentation in regards to environmental conditions are 2016, 17, 18, and 19, because you can see that depending on the age class, there would be animals in freshwater during this period, depending on the population and the age. The marine years that we're going to focus on are 18, 19, 20, and this is when all these age classes are in the ocean. And there's periods of overlap, particularly 2020, when they're all in the ocean, which they are right now, waiting to return. So if we start in freshwater, the beginning of their life stages, looking at 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019, temperatures have been warmer in those years in the different seasons. So if we look at these years, these are, again, anomaly plots, deviations from average. A lot of red means warmer than average. So in the spring, in May air temperatures over British Columbia, temperatures were above average. And you can see 2018 is particularly striking as a very warm spring. These warmer spring air temperatures combined with other factors contributes to lower snowpacks in the spring as well. So these are May, in some cases June, snowpack figures. If you see a lot of red, it means there's almost no snowpack. And then these cooler colors, there are better snowpack conditions in the legends down here on the lower right. 2016, 2018, 2019 are pretty striking for low snowpacks in mid-May to early June. 2017 is doing a bit better from a snowpack perspective in those spring months. So when you combine warmer spring air temperatures, lower snowpacks, and then higher summer air temperatures, and you don't have as much of a buffering effect from snowpacks entering the systems, this can combine to create warmer river temperatures, which is what we're ultimately concerned about for salmon. So if we look at summer air temperatures, which is just part of that story, generally for these 4 years, air temperatures were above average, particularly for 2017 and 2018. 2019 was a bit more neutral, but for the most part, there was warmer air temperatures in the summer. Another important part of climate change is precipitation changes. We expect more extreme rain events and more dry periods or drought periods under climate change, and that should increase with time. We can see with these plots, if you see a lot of brown, those are dry periods. And particularly in the south, you can see in summer months, precipitation is below average. It's drier than average. 2017 stands out throughout the province as being fairly dry, a fairly dry year. So this is just another important variable that contributes to the conditions salmon are experiencing, and it can amplify temperature effects if you have lower river levels, less inputs from rain to cool the rivers, and it contributes to other things as well. If we put that all together, we are seeing where we record river temperatures, water temperatures increasingly exceeding 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. So in the Fraser, where there's monitoring done, they're seeing this with regularity now in summer months. And when you get above 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, that's problematic for adult fish migration. They can die before they make it to their spawning grounds, or if they do make it to their spawning grounds, they may not spawn successfully or produce poorer quality offspring. So how those river temperatures play out on individual streams just depends on other inputs like groundwater or glacier inputs. So there is variability in terms of how these systems are responding to these warmer air temperatures. But it is notable that in some of the systems we are recording these warmer temperatures. There's also there's observations of drought out there amongst all of you and others out in the field. And these dewatering events are problematic for juveniles that are rearing in these systems. It means it can strand them or cut them off from their rearing habitats and lead to mortalities. We're also seeing more years of early spring freshets. How this actually connects to salmon production is less clear, but it is a flag that it's an unusual thing that's becoming more and more regular. As we see those warmer springs, we're getting these earlier freshets. So I'm just going to pause for a minute and just recap that piece. We're seeing on a global scale warming temperatures. And because northern latitudes are warming twice as fast as the globe, it's not surprising that we're also seeing warming signals in freshwater or in the air over British Columbia, and that translating into warmer river temperatures. So it all kind of nests within that larger context. These changes in temperature and precipitation are affecting the ecosystems that salmon use, but they also interact with habitat changes that are occurring. And so going back to the key years we're focused on in freshwater, 2016, 17, 18, 19, it's notable to point out that 2017 and 2018 were big forest fire years in British Columbia from hectares burned, and they hit records. Those were the two highest hectares burned in British Columbia, and they fit within the context for the 2021 outlook. And it's not exactly clear how, if a forest fire was burning in surrounding a salmon habitat, how that will influence returns, but it is again a notable observation in some of these systems where this was occurring. It's important to point out. The increase in forest fires, pine beetles, these are climate change mediated changes. They're also influenced by other factors as well as human activities on land that leads to deforestation, is creating a synergy. It's pushing some of these streams, creating more sedimentation. With heavy rainfall events, you get more sediments flowing into the habitats that salmon are using, and that can smother eggs or decrease the quality of habitat that the juveniles are using to rear. So that's problematic. Also, deforestation compounds the effects of warming temperatures because you have less riparian vegetation to cool the river systems. Climate change is also increasing the frequency of landslides. I'm not saying necessarily that Big Bar in the Fraser River was caused by climate change, but there is research that suggests that we should see greater frequency of landslides with climate change. This is also just pointing out that this habitat event, regardless of changing climate, compounds the challenges for salmon when they try to move upstream of these kind of events. And we've seen a lot of landslides in recent years. There's the Big Bar one that's very striking and concerning to all of us. And there was landslides in the Portage system. And then just a few weeks ago, there was a big Butte Inlet landslide on Southgate River. And that came from a piece of glacier falling into the lake. And that is likely also a climate-mediated event. So this is just to point out that things are also compounding the temperatures. So we're seeing some anomalously warm air temperatures and other conditions in freshwater leading up to the 2021 returns. The ocean is also changing. So the key years we're interested in are 2018, 19, 20. This is a slide that Lori Whitecamp from NOAA presented to us recently, and it's a paper pulled out from a local academic named Chang. He published in 2020. And this really concerned her as an oceanographer, ocean scientist, because it's showing that the ocean is warming and absorbing 90% of the Earth's excess heat. So the ocean is warming. And the left plot, similar to the other plot I showed on the planet, was cooler in the beginning of the time series, but when you get into the mid-1990s, the ocean started to really pick up that signal of warming conditions. The plot on the right is also quite concerning because it's not just warming at ocean surfaces, but it's also warming all the way at depth. And the ocean is a huge mass of water, and if it warms up, as it warms and absorbs this heat, it cannot cool down quickly. We can't just turn off the taps and have it cool down. It will have a long lag effect to actually cooling. And this net increase in warming is a concern. Combined with that, we're also seeing sea surface temperature extremes in the ocean. And the big striking one was the blob. It was so striking that oceanographers referred to it as the blob, which is something they don't commonly do, refer to things with common names. This was a warm heat wave that was 3 to 5 degrees Celsius above seasonal average, and it extended down 100 meters depth. And it lasted for a long time, from 2013 to 2016, and it had big implications on salmon food webs and salmon responses. Salmon seem to respond in a number of cases poorly to this warming. Heat waves are predicted to increase in frequency, magnitude, and extent of occurrence with climate change. So this is something that really scared us when it first appeared in 2013. It dissipated a bit in late 2017 and into 2018. But then it started to warm up again. And so we're getting into the years that we care about for our salmon returning in 2021, which is 2018, where the blob reef, this warming reformed in the ocean. It kind of waxed and waned a tiny bit. So I'm just moving through the years. Going into 2019, you can see that at times it's pretty intense all over the North Pacific and into the Bering Sea. And then in 2019, it remains. So throughout the period that our salmon were rearing in the ocean, there has been this warming remaining in the Northeast Pacific. We go into 2020, just right now, it's still out there. And what's interesting about November 2020, and Lori Whitecamp pointed this out in her talk too, is that this purple line along the equator is a La Nina. La Nina often means better conditions for salmon. It means cooler waters, more precipitation, just overall, it's often linked to better productivity for salmon. And this is what I was saying at the very beginning when I started the talk. Our past ideas about how these conditions affect salmon are changing because La Nina is potentially being swamped out by the blob now in the ocean. So as the ocean animals are rearing in the ocean, they're experiencing the blob, not so much these cooling effects from La Nina. So where this was historically considered a good thing, it might not be so much given this warm heat wave that's out in the ocean. The key route that warmer ocean affects our salmon is through how it changes the food web. We normally have these big, large zooplankton species that form the base of the salmon food web, and they have big fat reserves, considered quite nutritious for salmon. And in these warmer years, these southern zooplankton move into our waters. They're smaller, less nutritious, and they tend to dominate our waters. And they have remained quite dominant in our waters throughout this warming period, these smaller southern zooplankton. There's a lot of other observations. They don't necessarily link directly to salmon production in and of themselves, but they are signaling shifts in the temperatures of the waters and the ecosystems. So as we start to see these strange animals in our different researchers out there on cruises seeing these fish, they flag them as things that they've never seen before, and it's just important to point them out. And it suggests to us that things are changing, and it adds extra uncertainty in terms of where we're going in 2021. So to recap, the temperatures on the planet are changing, and we're seeing similar shifts in our freshwater and marine ecosystems for salmon. In freshwater, we're seeing summer months, spring months that are warmer air temperatures, and that, along with lower snowpacks, is leading to warmer river temperatures. We're seeing more drought conditions. We're seeing earlier spring freshets, and we're seeing forest fires and other impacts on land that are contributing to challenges for salmon in freshwater. The marine ecosystem is also experiencing unprecedented changes. The warm blob has persisted through to 2020 right now. We still are seeing lipid poor zooplankton dominating the food webs, and there's a lot of unusual observations, and I just recapped on that. So what this means for 2021 returns is we're broadly seeing similar conditions as we have in recent years, these big signals of warmer conditions and shifts that may suggest that we should expect similar salmon responses in 2021. That means for a number of stocks below average survival for many stocks. So Fraser Sockeye in the last 2 years, for example, was hitting new record lows in 2019 and now in 2020. We've seen coast-wide declines in Chinook. There are some exceptions, but there are these declines from down south in the US all the way up to Alaska. And we're also seeing greater variability in salmon production. So this Outlook presentation is just, on environmental conditions, is just emphasizing that we're seeing more of the same, and to use that to kind of place the salmon outlook in context. We really, again, want to emphasize that what I'm speaking about is not one person's thoughts. It's a synthesis of things coming together from all the work that everyone's doing, including many of you on this call, in terms of the field work and the thinking. So I think it's, just to conclude, a collaborative effort pulling that story together. And that concludes my our environmental conditions presentation.